Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us again. We are having the second episode of the Synergy B2B Business Insights podcast. I'm Nick Stager. You might have seen me on the last one. We have two more guests this time. We have Brian and AJ with Katapult. So why don't you guys do a quick 20-second introduction who you guys are. AJ, let's start with you.
All right, easy enough. I'll say it. My name is AJ Knollmaier. I am a senior account executive for Katapult Network. Started here about 3 years ago. Actually went through Katapult to help me find my job, and now I get to do that for new recent grads.
And Brian?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Brian Johnson, the co-founder CEO of Katapult Network. Love helping getting those recent grads into the new jobs and solving the problems for companies looking to hire at this level. Happy to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for being here. We really appreciate it. So let's kind of just dive right in. So Brian, I'm going to start with you. What are some of the main challenges and obstacles that companies are kind of facing right now when it comes to sourcing and attracting top talent, freshly from college?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is just addressing the fact of really understanding what they need for the right fit, for the right position, and connecting that to recent grads that may not know that they exist, right? So having a challenge in hiring can be not really fleshing out their position well enough so that a recent grad knows what they're actually looking for to attract them to their position. Unless they're a big company name like a 3M, Target, or something like that, it can be really hard to even create that brand recognition for that demographic. And then also just not really always being able to understand the transferable makeup of an entry-level person that doesn't have experience.
Interesting. That's definitely some things that I would not necessarily have guessed. AJ, with the majority of the graduating class now being Gen Z, how do they differ from millennials in terms of perspectives and expectations?
Yeah, there's definitely a new bridge to gap, if you will. When looking at Gen X and millennials, we still had that loyalty and we had a very certain sense of work. That's all really changing. There's a huge percentage of Gen Zs that are much more entrepreneurial and they want to take on that leadership role. So when you talk about side gigs and working multiple jobs, whether that's their full-time job, they can DoorDash, there's a lot of different opportunities out there. They value work-life balance a lot more. They're much more individualistic. So we're talking to a brand new demographic that companies will have to start to get over and understand that's the necessity for them. And it's going to be a lot more important that they make those changes because they value flexibility. The more flexible you're going to be, the more interested these candidates are going to be, and that is going to be extremely important to them.
Yeah, I definitely can see that within the new generation, especially with the work-life balance. It's definitely something challenging. I think as a millennial, I feel like I'm kind of in between that spot, you know. But that's definitely, it's good insight right there.
Yeah, and a lot of it too is the fit. We noticed that kind of coming out of COVID where, it wasn't as much they needed the experience. They wanted these candidates or this person to fit their team the most. And I think that is also a big note for Gen Z is they want that fit and I'm not going to say they won't pay attention to salary, but there is a large percentage that is also looking at all of the other benefits that come with the position rather than just salary. It is the flexibility, a lot of other things that make sense to them.
So with Katapult, finding these positions for all these new recent grads, I assume pretty much everything within the hiring process is something you guys take into consideration. So my next question is, when it comes to reviewing resumes, what are some of the best practices that companies should follow or should be looking for when it comes to hiring a new grad?
Sure. And Brian, I'll let you take this one.
Okay. Perfect.
I know you love resumes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when it comes to looking at resumes for companies and trying to evaluate talent on that, I'd say throw the resume away if we could. I dream of a time when we can get rid of resumes. I think there's a lot of misconceptions. You could have Chat GPT write the resume for you or pay someone to write it. Also, I think it's kind of absurd that you're supposed to fit your life into one piece of paper and that's your ticket into a company or your story. Just today, we had a young lady who literally did almost not get the interview with a company because she had transitioned a couple different jobs, and there was a good reason for it. We had to explain to that employer that she wasn't a job hopper. She left the job because they were trying to force her into sales in her last position. So, again, if you don't take the time to understand the story, you're going to miss out on high-quality talent, and I think that's really the challenge that companies are faced is, looking at the resume, assuming that is the full picture, not taking the time to actually learn about that person.
Yeah. You also look at an inbox and say there are certain companies where maybe they'll only fit 50 resumes, but they're going to get 200 applicants. If they just have a shutoff valve, they're going to miss out on a lot of this talent. So when you restrict yourself to just resumes, it's a pitfall.
Interesting. So can we jump, you guys mentioned this already. So with recruiting companies, observing notable changes within the candidate pool, what types of the things that are they seeing? I know you guys mentioned job hopping. Is there anything else within that you guys kind of see?
Within a general talent pool that we're seeing right now?
Yes.
There's a lot of changes, and this is just about the hiring process, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think, again, COVID had a huge impact on that, and it's gotten a little bit more convenient, but companies are spending now too many steps or taking too many steps to actually hire somebody on. We hear about 6, 7, 8-step interview processes, and that should never be the case. But what is really nice is now you can rely on a phone screen. How is this person? Can they communicate on the phone? Then you can do, let's say, a Zoom call, and you could schedule that for a half an hour, 45 minutes, before you want to take that dive and make sure this is the right person that I actually want to bring in person to see if it's a good fit. So you can do a couple of these steps in a much quicker pace, but at the same time, not having that face-to-face interaction. And there are companies that hire solely just through Zoom. So there are some issues with that. But again, it's all practicing to make sure you're comfortable in front of a screen and then also comfortable being in front of an actual human being and going through that interview process. So it's changed quite a bit, but the goal still should always be to get that in-person interview.
It's interesting you say that. You definitely mentioned some screen work, which is more prevalent than ever in our society. So Brian, when it comes to remote work, how are companies adapting to the evolving demands of remote work or hybrid models?
Yeah, there's been huge changes. I think, initially when COVID hit, it was deer in headlight moment. A lot of companies were very nervous about how to conduct their typical business, especially when it comes to training. I think it really impacted entry level more than anything, because you have a generation of people that doesn't know the job, needs to be trained on the job. And so they were at even more of a disadvantage because companies weren't sure how to train them initially. Since then, we've seen tremendous changes. We've seen companies that had a never work from home policy going completely remote. We've had a lot of hybrid situations coming out, and companies really adapting to ways to train virtually through group chats or online videos like this. So it's been quite a huge change. I think, to be honest, it's gone a little bit in a direction of more remote than anything. And I think maybe we could pull back a little. Hybrid would probably be a better combo for most companies. I think most candidates, we're seeing like the entry-level talent right now that's coming out, a lot of them would prefer to have some hybrid or in office. They don't want to work remotely from home. And if you think about it, why would they? I mean, they're probably living at home with their mom and dad. I mean, do you really want to be in your basement with your mom and dad upstairs? And that's your job, that's your day, 8 to 5. So a lot of those young, talented candidates coming out that are recent grads are probably wanting more of the hybrid and a little bit more office time. But we have seen a huge shift in companies going to remote. So it's been quite a swift change.
So with companies, switching more to a remote type of job, working that hybrid spot, are there any notable shifts in the salary expectations or negotiations between the candidates' employers? I mean, especially with, inflation has been really bad recently. I mean, what can you talk to me about that with, as far as salary expectations or additional benefits, I suppose, for the new hire?
I mean, I think that's one of the nice things that we do when candidates first come to us is we're going to make sure we're going to find them a realistic expectation of what their job pays. We're very concerned in making sure that they're getting what they're paid for, but at the same time, very wary when companies want to offer too much. There's a lot of those situations, if they're not going to pay enough, that the candidate might not take it, but if they do pay too much, they might be expecting too much. So you really have to look at that negotiation process and make sure, they land on the same plane. I guess, and Brian, you probably have more to add on that than I do.
Yeah, I think that was really well said, AJ. I don't know if I have too much more to add to that, other than I think, we've seen a lot of shifting, and it's starting to come back in the other direction a little bit. It's, it was extremely high salary ranges, and then it's sort of leveling out a little bit right now because the economy shift. But there's still quite a few good offers coming out for recent grads, and talent in general still seems to be a bit short at times. So it's coming back a little bit more to earth, but it's still a little bit on the candidate side too. So anyway,
yeah, it is still entry level. So at the end of the day, it's an entry level position. You have to work your way up, and so we want to make sure we get them a good starting point, but something like you said they can afford to buy eggs and gas and whatever that entails.
Yeah, the things that help life be happy, right? I mean, who doesn't love their eggs every morning, right? And now they're $5 a carton, right? So anywho, Speaking of which, with the recent economic conditions or market disruptions, how has that affected the recruitment strategies of companies?
I'm gonna take that off to start if you don't mind. So a lot of these companies, when you look at the hiring process, what a lot of companies will assume is that going to an outsourced company or organization is actually going to cost them more money. What they don't look at is what they're spending internally to hire on their own. If you are a single department head and you are hiring for, let's say, customer service or accounting, whatever that might be, you're still taking away, let's say, the head accountant or someone in leadership who's can guarantee you're probably making more than $40,000 a year. You're taking away from their time to do their job. So there's a lot of additional costs within recruiting that most companies don't look at. So when they do look at, another cost on top of that, that's where it gets concerning. However, in some of our programs, we have essentially almost net zero billing. So where companies and a lot of recruiting companies don't do anything like that, that's what we're doing to kind of change the game to help companies get access to a much, much larger talent pool that is all pre-screened and doing it without increasing their costs, which I think when we're looking at inflation and looking at cutting costs is an absolute necessity for businesses. And then adding on kind of that specialized service to it, I think that's a really important piece and kind of what we're seeing in this, economic situation.
Brian, next question is for you. So, Brian, many companies are concerned about Gen Z employees leaving the business after 1 year. What can companies do to kind of retain their entry-level talent to help make their business, flourish?
Yeah, I think, it shouldn't be that hard. It's not hard to think about how to retain somebody, although it seems to be a challenge for a lot of companies. And there is a lot of fear with companies afraid of, we hire a Gen Z, they're going to be gone in a year because they're just naturally going to be hoppers. I hear that a lot, which really isn't true. I mean, I myself at Katapult, we have plenty of people that have stayed with us for a number of years. Our director of recruiting was with me from the very start, over 8 years now. So I think the biggest thing I would offer is to offer a career path. If you don't have a career path, no foreseeable, motivation to grow into something new, I think it's going to be very hard to keep those candidates long term. And I think it's unreasonable to think that you could. So if you don't have a path with your company, you should expect turnover and probably welcome it. And it's not the end of the world. It's, they give you their best year, if it is a year, or best 2 years, and they move on, and you've gotten a great devoted candidate for that period of time. The other thing that I think people need to keep in mind is a lot of Generation Z and even millennials, for the most part, they watch their parents devote their lives to a career and then have those companies completely wipe them away after 20, 30 years of being with that company as if they were nothing. And so for us to ask these young people to stay with these companies for a lifetime is just not a reality that they've even seen with their own parents. So I think it's a changing environment. I think it's, if you don't have a path, prepare for them to be turned over, and that's something you have to recognize.
So then a follow-up question to that. If you could make one change to the entry-level practices, what would you do to change that?
Yeah, is this a big question? This is a big one where
I'm a big one.
Really, yeah. If I could make one change, I'll just start by saying the entire system is extraordinarily dysfunctional. And I don't mean to be rude in saying that, but entry-level hiring today, entry-level hiring today is broken. We have colleges that continue to increase the cost of going to school. We have an ever-populous group of young people coming out that have no clue what the heck they're supposed to be doing with those degrees, no ability to connect those degrees to any real meaningful jobs, and companies still really uncertain about hiring college grads and sometimes even confused about it or misguided in their strategy. Let's face it, if we're going to hire a recent college grad, it might be helpful to write a description that they could actually understand. We have job descriptions that are coming out loaded with details, many of which say 1 to 3 years experience. Well, excuse me, I'm a college grad and I didn't get that memo. I didn't know that we're supposed to have 1 to 3 years experience. I think that is a ridiculous requirement if you're trying to hire at the entry level. Not to mention your job description is filled full of stuff they can't understand. And so the system is broken. We have an ever huge population graduating from college, deeply in debt. There's no surprise, right? Or their parents that help fund that are in debt doing this. And the students can't find a job, can't connect the dots. And so the whole system is broken. We need to really revise it. And so if I could make one change, if anything, I would want colleges to implore more internship exposure throughout college as a part of the curriculum. I mean, if you want to know what it takes to get a job, do an internship, and lots of them. The colleges should be creating a level of, we're going to educate you for half of it. The other half of it is we're going to build in internships. Whether you're a theater degree, major in music, you're a business grad, whatever, you need exposure to the professional world. So that way, when you graduate, you have both a combination of experience and education. You can land more of those jobs. I don't know why this is hard for colleges to get in line with this, and I think it would make a huge difference. Any young person that is entering college, please do multiple internships. It'll make such a difference in your ability to land that first job. It'll be literally night and day. It should be a requirement of every degree, regardless of what. So I could go on for days, but I'll stop.
I actually, another question popped up in my head just after hearing that, because you started making me think about when I graduated college, 8 years ago, and I had to start looking for, my first job out of college. I do remember seeing all those different job descriptions of, 2 to 3 years experience, or you need to, have like a doctor and whatever. I mean, I'm exaggerating there.
Yeah.
But how much of that job description is truly, everything they're looking for, or how much is it sort of some fluff that maybe they're trying to just filter out some of the people that don't actually qualify for what they're looking for? And like, just for example, when we put out a hiring job description for whatever position, we'll write a 4-year college degree and then 3 to 5 years experience. But I can tell you right now that doesn't actually matter. It's more about just to filter in the people that really truly aren't the right fit for that. So
Yeah.
my question is, are those generally pretty accurate? Are they like 80% accurate? Is it kind of like 50-50 fluff, just to like what I was just saying? What do you guys think?
I think it can be a pretty good mixture, because there are certain staples where there are, maybe a bullet point list of things that they absolutely need to have, but it very much depends on the job. If they're going in for, like a lab tech position, that job description is much likely, you have to have those things. But then when you peel that back and maybe we're feeling receptionist, customer service, then it's all really looking at transferable skills. And that's what more companies should be focusing less on the requirements and what can they learn to be successful in this role. And I think if you were to look at a job description, those are the sorts of things you should look internally to say, that's what's going to benefit me and benefit the company, because I know I can do that or I can learn that. So it's really looking at those certain things, but I think it all kind of boils down to transferable skills. And on the company side, I mean, they might have, I'm not going to say they all do this, but maybe they reused another job description and they have kind of a blanket slate of list items. It might not always be perfect, but they're hoping you can hit, let's say 60, 70, 80% of what they have on that job description. The rest is preferred. You see required, then you see preferred. Might be preferred.
I would even add further, here's a wild idea for everyone to consider. Let's stop with the job descriptions and stop with resumes. Wild idea. I think most businesses have as much enthusiasm to write a job description as that college kid does to put the resume together. I've gotten some of the worst job descriptions. I won't name the companies. I've gotten some that are literally, I got one recently, it was a paragraph long. I literally am going to have to rewrite that. I don't know what, it's supposed to be an ad. Who are we attracting with that doesn't, you couldn't attract a bird to it if you put a piece of bird seed on it. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. We got people, let's just drop it. I mean, and not to mention the fact, even if you have experience, do you have the exact same experience, like the HA says, word for word experience that the company is requiring? Probably not, so they're going to have to train you. If you pull back the curtain and ask most employers what they want, it's humble, hardworking, eager, ability to learn. Those are sort of the communication skills, organizational skills. It comes down to the bare transferable abilities. And so, let's just say focused on that, especially if you're hiring at the entry level. These are unless our college education system is completely broken, these are college educated people. They have the capability of learning. So in my 19 years, going on 20 years of recruiting recent college grads, I've never had an employer call me and say, Timmy or Samantha could not learn the job. Most of these young people are learning it within a month. They're smart. I mean, we got college kids starting jobs, starting companies in dorms. But then the rest of the business community is like, I don't see experience. Well, who cares? What is experience? Experience is nothing more than you got a head start in the race. Doesn't mean you're faster. I like donuts. So if I run against my wife or any athletic person and I get a 2-mile head start and I win the race because of it, I am not faster or more fit. I got a head start. Experience is the same thing. You got experience. Doesn't mean you're better at the job. It means you're born before. It means you're a little older maybe, but doesn't mean you're better. Because if we get down to the core of what makes a person better, it's their raw talents and transferable skills. That's it. That's all we should be worrying about with jobs. What are the qualifications? Focus on the transferable skills and let that the person being interviewed focus on proving they have those skills. Then we can learn and teach and do the rest. I absolutely hate job descriptions, and I absolutely hate resumes.
Yeah, I'll say neither of them are fun because if you look at it, it's a job description is basically your ability to get candidates interested, and a resume is the same thing. So it turns into a dating profile where if it's going to be a quick swipe, they're not going to read everything, and that's the other part of it. If they're scrolling through Indeed and ZipRecruiter, which are huge functions of what candidate and job seekers are looking at, they're not going to read it all. They might look at the company, job title, a few responsibilities, and if that doesn't jump out to them, they're going to move on. So it's a disservice to both the company and the candidate that our entire system is built around 2 pieces of paper, essentially.
Yeah.
You have to do in person. You have to meet them. You have to really see what they can do, and a resume and a job description will not do that.
Yeah, I mean, I could go off on this for days. I'm not trying to be rude. It's just, it's frustrating. And I think to AJ's point, like, when you put out a job description, you're supposed to be attracting talent. You're sharing your company's story, right? Hopefully. Well, a lot of times when a recent college grad, some of our candidates send their resume forward. We have clients like, I don't want to meet this person. And I'd like to say to that client, they don't want to meet you either. Look at your job description. It's absolutely not attractive, not interesting, and it looks dull and boring. So what if they could say the same thing about you? I mean, let's flip the coin. Your job description, you handed me a paragraph, and that's supposed to attract a candidate, and then you have the audacity to take a 1-page lifetime of achievement of a recent college grad and say, I don't want to meet this person because I don't see it on paper. Well, let's look in the mirror here a little bit, businesses. Your job descriptions are not that great reading. I don't know people that are looking those things up and reading them in the middle of the night for entertainment. They're not interesting. So I think like the whole system is just, it needs a big redo, and it's a pet peeve of mine.
As you can tell, we have a lot of feelings about resumes and job descriptions. But it's important. I think a lot of companies look past that and they're like, well, we're still attracting people, but again, just that system is broken. So yeah, shouldn't be the be all end all, but somehow companies think it is.
I love the analogy of the experience in the race, meaning that doesn't mean you're faster if you just started first, right? That was a really good, really puts it in perspective for me. I'm hoping the listeners took a lot out of that because that was one of those super simple things, but you just think about something differently and it changes the way you thought. So that was a really good one. We're running out of time here. Do you guys have any last second thoughts that you guys want to get on this podcast before we get out of here?
I got one anecdote, and it's just I think companies need to change the way they look at recent college grads. Whether it's entitled, there's just a negative connotation about it, whether it was millennials or it is Gen Z. It's going to be the same thing. These kids are growing up and they're looking forward to the right opportunity. You just have to give it to them. And there's a lot of positions that companies think a recent grad wouldn't want this, when at the end of the day, it's probably a perfect fit for them and they can grow within the company. So don't think a position is ever too low. It's a starting point. It's a foot in the door. College grads will take a lot of these positions. They just need the opportunity. So I want to end with that.
Yeah.
Well Sounds good to me. Well, thank you, Brian and AJ. Thank you for being on the pod. We really appreciate it. Synergy B2B definitely extends their thank you to you guys. Really good advice, really good expertise, and the insights, which is what this podcast is all about. I thought that was really great. So without further ado, I'm going to get out of here. Thank you guys, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
On 4th and 3.
I know.